my share of green. But when I flipped my truck, I was sober as could be. Yeah, this is my story. The truth behind me.
It's Brittany Lee with episode 2. My whole premise, again, is just talking to people. Everybody has a story to tell. I want to bring different people on my podcast from different walks of life and let them tell their stories. I'm fascinated by humans and what they can do. And so I thought this would be the perfect guest because I have been interested in the paranormal. I am an empath, and since I was a child, it has just fascinated me. So welcome, Bobbi.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Do you consider yourself to be a medium?
I do.
And is there a difference between a psychic, a medium?
There is. I don't know if my definition is the end-all, be-all, but I don't consider myself a psychic because I don't see into the future. I don't have visions, those types of things, which typically define a psychic. I consider myself a medium, and I am just the medium between our world and where those who have passed over are.
How old were you when you first realized that something just wasn't, as grown-ups define it, normal?
Probably around the age of 5. We had moved around quite a bit throughout the area and out of state, and in the course of moving, obviously, you live in a bunch of different homes where everybody else seemed to be okay and loving life, and I was the only one that was bothered by them. And at those times, I would talk to my mother about some of the things I was experiencing in the homes, and it just kind of freaked her out, and we were not allowed to talk about that. So not until I was older did I really start to develop that gift more fully and understand what the implications were of having such a gift.
Most of my life growing up, I just felt a little bit off. I just never felt like I quite belonged anywhere specific or like I fit in with anybody, and lots of weird things happened to me my whole life. I had, about 10 years ago, I had 2 very, very big events that occurred for me that kind of made me start my journey of trying to figure out why I was doing this and why I was feeling this. And a few years ago, I realized that I was an empath. And
opens a lot
suddenly,
of doors for
suddenly
you.
everything in my life made sense.
It does.
Once I accepted the fact that I was and embraced it, it completely changed everything for
Absolutely.
me. Were you scared at first?
I was, and I've actually worked in healthcare for over 24 years in different areas. One of the areas that I did work when we talk about being scared and being an empath, because I am an empath as well. And for those that don't know, this is the ability to pick up on energies either from people, environment, residual energy in a location, and it can cause a lot of anxiety. So in saying that I worked in healthcare, you start to wonder if something's wrong with you. Should we medicate this anxiety? Should we take medication for it? And then you realize the anxiety isn't really yours.
Right.
And once you understand that and learn to deal with it, you can deflect it. But it's very scary. In some places, it can be extremely intimidating to the point where people have panic attacks and they cannot stay in a place or in the presence of particular people. So you go into fight or flight mode and you have no idea why.
Totally agree with you. Those 2 incidents that I had, you just described them perfectly. And I had no idea why this was happening to me. It was like my whole world was different. Mm-hmm. It was the strongest I'd ever felt in that kind of a situation. And just learning to embrace it kind of helped quite a bit. My mother used to tell me that I was an attention seeker and that I was overly dramatic and too emotional. And it was almost in a negative connotation. And then I look back at it and I think, no, I wasn't like that as a child. That was just me taking on those feelings.
And you can't always control how it happens. I do recall being in the middle of Price Chopper at one point, and I was very pregnant, and I thought I was going to pass out for absolutely no reason whatsoever. So it can happen at any time. There was no medical reason for it. It's just energy that's getting too close too quickly, and you have a bubble and a comfort zone, and they're in it. So I always give this example for every lecture that I've done or anyone that I've ever talked to and tried to explain to them what being an empath means. And I said everyone can do it to some degree. And the example I give is we've all been standing in line in the store and all of a sudden you just, oh my God, there is somebody really creepy behind me. I don't even want to turn around. And you side glance them when you walk out, and you're like, Jesus, they are creepy.
Yeah.
How did you know that?
Right.
Because their energy does not mesh with your energy, and that's your body's way of telling you this is not a good energy for you. You need to remove yourself from this. So we all have the ability, just some are far more sensitive than others.
As a medium, do you see the people that you're communicating with, or do you just feel things? How does that work for you?
When I start a reading, the first thing I will ask someone is, have you ever had a reading? And the reason I ask you is because I'm going to tell you how it works for me. So generally, no, I don't see people. It does happen infrequently. When I walk into a place, I will see them. And I tell people, we all see ghosts more than we realize, because if you walk into a place and you see someone, it's just like me looking at you right now. So it will startle you and scare you until you realize that's what it is. But how it works for me is I'm kind of dating myself. It's like seeing a slideshow in your head, and I'm watching this movie of all these things, and I can just describe to you what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling, or what I'm hearing. And it's not hearing as though you and I are talking. It's like that little nagging voice in your head that's talking to you, that type of hearing. So I relay that.
Can you turn it on and off?
You can, yes. And I don't like crowds, because it becomes more difficult to turn it off.
I'm laughing because I'm the same exact way.
It's too much energy. It's too much energy all at once. So yes, I do readings, I do the medium part, but a lot of what I'm doing is also helping people. Okay, so if you were to come see me, my husband really wants to go to concerts, I can't do crowds. Why? Well, you're an empath. Let's talk about that now. Let's work on meditation and visualization techniques to help you be able to function and go into a crowd and ward off all that negative energy. Not just so you can perform your daily tasks of going into crowds, it's part of your job.
Right.
But for health reasons, that negative energy can stick with you. It can cause long-term health issues. You can become sick. You have to learn to cleanse yourself of that energy.
Once you realize, and it's especially for me, once I realized what was really going on, and I started to understand some of the things like you said, and being in radio and having a husband in radio for years, we go to many concerts and we're in many crowded situations. There were times when I'd have to get up in the middle of a concert and go out in the lobby and just get away from everything because it was just too much for me to handle.
Absolutely.
And so now that I'm conscious of it, I make conscious decisions. Mm-hmm. I sit in certain places. I'm not down with the big crowds. I do certain things to make sure that I don't put myself in situations that I can't handle anymore. So I think you're right. It's all about knowledge and being able to understand what you deal with on a daily basis.
Some of the lectures that I've done recently are talking to people where you had said, putting yourself in different situations. This works for everyone, even when you consider your workspace. If you're working with people that are chronically negative, you will become chronically negative. Not because it's a learned behavior, you're absorbing that toxic energy. So you have to remove yourself from that situation, or you have to learn how to change the way that it affects you. So some people might laugh and say, well, being an empath, ha ha ha. But when you bring it to real life situations and how it's impacting you in other parts of your life, people are far more interested in what you have to say. And they're more open to it.
Why did you decide to start doing actual readings?
It was funny that it started this way. I had met a young man who asked me to join a paranormal group, which seemed like fun and games because I watched Ghost Adventures. It was so much fun,
Me too.
right? You know? And then you start doing it and you're like, wow, this is really scary. It's not fun at all. I mean, it's interesting. You learn a lot. But his mother had passed away, and he was having a very hard time dealing with it. And I ended up speaking to him and watched how he progressed in his grief process and started healing. Then we had started doing some lectures with the paranormal group, and I had met a beautiful woman who lost her 3-year-old daughter to cancer. And she came to me, this little girl, during this lecture, and I ended up speaking to her, and she put me in contact with so many other parents that had lost children. They had been going to grief counseling for years, which is great. I think it's very important to go to grief counseling. But what they weren't getting there is they needed to know that their children were okay, and I could help them with that. And that's when I realized, it's fun to go and do the paranormal part, but I could help people.
Sure.
And that's when I started to do it professionally.
Do you ever get something that is not good and you're not sure how to relay that? Is that something that happens to you ever?
It does, but I'm selective in what I tell people because I believe that what I have is a gift and I am here to share it to help people. If you were to come to me and say someone had passed away in a horrific accident, I want to know all about it, that's not going to help you heal. To know the details of that, I can tell you that they were in a lot of pain, not in a lot of pain, but they're in a good place now.
Right.
In more words, obviously, but you don't need to know the gory details. I will see them, and the person will tell me about them, but I'm not going to tell. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
It's not therapeutic
completely.
by any means. Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
You kind of have to pick and choose and decide how you're going to relay things without making it worse.
Do no harm.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you see your own relatives?
No.
No?
I am so upset about that.
It's like asking a psychic if they can, why didn't you win the lottery yet?
Exactly. Although I have spoken to my husband about some of his relatives and made him cry in the middle of Starbucks. He told me I can never talk to him again. But no, it's funny because a medium cannot read themselves. So people ask me a lot, how come you don't do big parties? Why do you only do individual sessions? Is it because of money? It's absolutely not. The reason is I cannot read myself. So I had spent a great deal of money to go see another medium in a big crowd. And there were probably close to 300 people there, and I needed to hear from my grandmother. I needed it.
Right.
Well, obviously she didn't think I did, and I didn't hear anything, but I started to think there are 200 other people here that feel just as disappointed as I do right now. And it also makes people doubt the reality of what I'm doing. So I want to remove that and give them the individualized attention that they deserve.
I have to ask you this. Do you believe that everybody who says they have a gift really has a gift?
That's a tough one because there's an irony, and I don't want to be a hypocrite. There are some people that are very good at reading body language. So I would say they're very good at that, and they probably aren't mediums.
I think that there's some, personally, I've been to several over the years, I've had my tea leaves read, I've had tarot cards, and I've been to a couple of animal communicators for my pets. I have to say that I have had very good experiences, and I'm one of those people that I'm not somebody who just believes anything.
Right.
I go into it with a healthy, skeptical approach. I'm not going to tell you any details. I want you to tell me, not you personally, but I want you to tell me what you see. And I have honestly had very good experiences. I just spoke to an animal communicator who will be on this podcast in the future. She is dead on, no pun intended. She is right on. And I couldn't believe the things that she was telling me that only I would know.
Exactly.
And it was just amazing to me. But I think that there are some people who, as in any walk of life, are not in it for the reason that they say they are. But absolutely. I just was curious about that, because you deal with... You know how you feel. You know what you experience. I know what I experience. So to us, we know what we feel is correct and right.
During lectures, you'll have people, well, read this person and prove it to me by doing this. And, it's a reading is a very personal thing for every single person that has one. It's not a circus sideshow.
Right.
And that's what I tell them. I'm not going to diminish the reality of what it is, but I will say that there have been people that have come in. There was someone from a newspaper that had come in. I don't remember who it was, but he said, I just want to let you know that I don't believe in what you do, but I'd like to talk to you. I said, that's fine. I said, I really want you to know that I don't have to prove anything, and you don't have to believe in the afterlife for the people there to believe in you. Long story short, I did talk to him about someone that had passed away, and aside from him being upset that I made him emotional, it changed his life, because at one point he was suicidal because he just didn't think that there was anything left for him. There was nothing after we passed away. All the people that meant anything were gone. What else did he have? And I said, your grandfather wants you to know that he sees this and explains to you how he feels about it. And he did reach out after and said, you were right. And I wasn't going to say that in front of my wife, but I do feel that way. And knowing that he is still here with me makes all the difference in the world. So people just need to know that they're not alone sometimes.
And personally, I've never been interested in group readings. Never. Because I feel like if I'm going to communicate through a medium with someone who's passed, it's such a personal thing for me.
Agree.
And I you're right, it's not a sideshow, it's not a circus. It's something very personal that I want to take with me and just me. So I completely understand why you wouldn't want to do that. Now, when my husband found out, when I went through my journey to realize that I was an empath, and he witnessed the two big events that happened to me, you could see it. He was totally supportive. He totally gets it. If I say I can't go into this place, or this is too much for me, he's fine with it, and we change how we're going to do things. How was it with your husband? Has he always been really, really good, or was it kind of hard for him to wrap his head around it?
I think it was difficult for him to wrap his head around the reality of it. He has always been supportive, but you hit the nail on the head. We had gone to, I believe it was Clinton, and we were going through all the little shops. It was really cool. And then he's like, well, I want to go into this. I can't. Why? I don't know. I just can't. I can't bring myself to go through the door. I don't know why. I cannot do it. I'm shaking. I can't. He's like, all right, well, we'll go down the block. It will come back. If you can, you can. If you can't, you can't.
Exactly. That'll happen to me sometimes. I don't want to know why I can't go in, to be honest with you.
Right.
I just trust that I don't want to go someplace or do something. And but I know that if I do, it's not going to be the best thing for me.
It's good that you listen to that, though.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah. It's a learning experience. Every day, something new will happen all the time that makes me really think about the choices that I make. Should I? Should I not? Is this good for me? Is it not good for me? It's about learning and knowledge, I guess, once you understand what's going on, or you're on your journey to understanding.
And I don't think that can all come from one source. I think that's the biggest struggle. Utica is big, but it's not. In this journey, I have talked to so many different people, but only taken little parts of what hit home with me. So I met with a shaman at one point, took parts of that to help me develop what I'm doing and help myself, and then met with someone who did Reiki and took parts of that. But not one of those things in its entirety was something that I utilized completely. So it's important to reach out to whatever resource you feel most comfortable with.
I'm just going to switch gears just a little bit, because we were talking about Dennis Webster and how we both have known him for a while. And you have done some readings with Ghost Seekers of Central New York in a couple of the locations.
Correct.
How did that come about?
I have an office on Court Street in Utica, and they had come to do an investigation there because the office is there and the spirits are most familiar with me because I work there frequently. They thought that they might communicate more if I were present.
And did that happen?
It did, and actually, I forget which one of the group members, Lenny had said, in 30 years of doing this was the most amazing thing that has ever happened. And I said, well, that's good.
And he's a character.
Yeah,
he's a character. So, Dennis is all jumpy and full of energy and heavy, but Leonard is just, he's quite the I love him.
Oh, yeah. His all business was, wow, no more all business. And Dennis was kind of like, can you make it stop? So
Dennis, I love him.
Yeah.
Do you plan on doing any more investigations?
I will do some as I am invited to do them, but I'm very selective about what I'm doing. And the reason for that is most of the times the places that I'm invited to go are high activity places, but they're high negative activity places. And I don't want to be associated with that type of energy. The groups are great,
right?
But that energy, it takes a long time to rid yourself of some of that. And I have too much to do in my life to be bogged down by negative energies.
I asked you earlier if you could turn it on and off, but can you actually, like if you walk into a place, do you immediately feel something and you just turn that off?
At times, but it's kind of like when you walk into a party and you have groups of people that are already speaking and they've segregated themselves in a party. As a medium, when I walk into a house, either they want to interact with me or they don't, and some of them are very standoffish, and I can get in there and do what I need to do. I'm going to a new place to get my hair cut, and I can do that without them bothering me. But other places, you might walk through a historical site and, oh my God, someone can talk to me, and then they bum rush you right at the door.
Right.
So it makes it more difficult. You can't really turn it off at that point. You can just manage it.
We see a lot of people watching the paranormal shows on TV, and
Yes.
there's one that I was just watching before I met with you today, and the psychic medium, was extremely dramatic, and she is very out there. I'm sure you guys know which one I mean, and I just kind of chuckle because does it get like that for you? Do you get dramatic, or is it very serious and very...
For the most part, it's very serious. I had talked to someone that was interested in doing a show similar to one that's on TV, and I said, I've watched that show and I love it and I'd love to do it, but I'm going to tell you right now, I don't have that drama. I'm not going to walk in there and be able to perform. That's not what I do.
One of the things that bothers me is that it is television.
Yes.
And everything is amped up for television, and that I always worry that people think that that's how it always is. And that real life is,
Nothing like
waving
that.
your arms around and cowering in the corner because something is beating you up and that kind of thing. And I always just worry because I take it very seriously. And so it just makes me worried that people just assume that that's what it is. Paranormal ghost hunting is so much fun. I've had plenty of experiences, and it's a lot of fun, but it's also serious.
It is, and it's more scientific than I think people realize. A lot of these people that are in these groups, they have master's degrees, PhDs. Their backgrounds are science and technology related. They create a lot of their own equipment based on scientific evidence in the process of elimination. You have a hypothesis, and now you're going to test it, and they use all this equipment that's way above me to figure it out.
I think that paranormal investigation, it should be a combination of scientific facts and investigation and the feelings side of it,
Yes.
the medium side of it. And, I use my equipment, but by the same token, I go by how I feel. If I don't feel like anything's going on, I take that as a point of fact, too. If I feel odd if I'm in a place, then there's something going on, maybe.
Absolutely.
I think you have to get a good balance, and that's what some of the groups that actually have real evidence, they kind of find that balance between the two.
And you have to. And when you're working with the scientific portion, now with the group that Dennis is part of, they were very respectful, and a lot of what they were doing was just, we want to use our equipment to validate what you're telling us.
Right.
And I said, I would love that, because here I am sitting feeling a bit crazy telling you that, I'm hearing and seeing all this stuff, and your equipment's doing nothing.
Right.
So it was very interesting to see those things come together. They did get some terrific evidence when they were there. At some point, they'll be releasing that. But it was very amazing to see how those two things came together.
Where can people find out more information about your readings or what you're doing, what's going on with you?
There is a website, Shops at the Finish Line. To the left of that page, there's actually testimonials, how to book an appointment, the office location, the history of the building, which is very interesting. And Dennis sells his books at that same location, and we do lectures at that location frequently with Dennis and the group that he affiliates with.
Bobbi, thank you so much for joining me today. This was fascinating. I really enjoyed this conversation. Would you come back sometime?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's Brittany Lee.
Well, I've done a lot of things, some of which I ain't too proud of, but it's my life and who I chose to be. So I've done a lot of drinking, and I've smoked my share of green, but when I flipped my truck, I was sober as could be. Yeah, this is my story, the truth behind me.